Good morning and welcome to Maryland Today. My name is Jeff St. Pierre and joining me is Nina Heck. She's the Director of Counseling and Client Services at Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Maryland and Delaware. Thanks so much for coming by, Nina.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Nina, since the recession, most people have become more frugal. In fact, some of us have a little bit less on their credit cards than we did 5 years ago. But with that said, I understand that recent studies show that we still have a lot more room to grow here. When it comes to consumer debt, where do we stand?
I think at this point, Jeff, for the people that have survived the recession, we're seeing them at a time where they're now reemployed, but probably not making the income they were prior to the recession. Mm-hmm. So some of which are people that are in foreclosures, had foreclosures, and have gone through modifications, and are now calling us because, again, the income wasn't what it used to be.
Right.
So we are seeing more people employed. However, it just wasn't the income that they were used to making. Having said that, some of them are suffering with collection accounts as a result of being unemployed and having less income to pay their bills, and maybe things came up that they weren't able to meet at the time during that period.
This might be an obvious answer here, but I'm going to ask the question for you anyway. How do people get into too much debt?
Often what leads to too much debt is a person who's not on top of their budget.
Yeah.
So they've had maybe, again, given this recession, they may be making less, but they've not adjusted their budget at all. So consequently, things are still occurring. They may still have major car repairs. They could have house repairs, illness, and there just simply isn't a budget set up that's structured to allow for these incidents to occur. So they end up using money they don't have.
We all have some kind of debt. Most people have something, whether it's a college loan, whether it's a car payment, or, buying groceries or gas on their credit card because you get some points off of it. But how do you know that you've got too much debt?
What we do is we have a little quiz that we use, and some of the things we're trying to find out from the consumer would be, for instance, are you living paycheck to paycheck? Mm-hmm. Do you run out of money before the next check comes in, and therefore you're already tapping into monies you don't even have at this point? One of the other things that we see that's very common is people will oftentimes use their credit cards to pay for household expenses that they used to be able to pay for in cash. Paying minimum payments to credit cards, only minimum payments. With the last Credit Card Act that came around, our credit card statements now reflect what the making the minimum payment does for us. And oftentimes people will call and they're like, so if I make this minimum payment of $15, it's only going to take me 20 years to pay this credit card off? So, you have that instance. You also have where you may actually just be missing payments.
Yeah, and that gets kind of scary, too. I know I've been in that position before myself. And what other questions are involved in this quiz that you have?
Some of the things that are obvious is if people are calling you. So if you have creditors or you have any of even your basic household expenses, your utility companies contacting you, that's something you want to be concerned about. Avoiding things that are essential. Oftentimes people, need their eyeglasses changed or they need dental assistance, and they avoid these things because they simply don't have the funds to pay them. Borrowing from family members, that's a big one. I often see people that'll, once we counsel them, they'll be short a couple $100 and they'll say, oh, my mom's been helping me, or my father, or somebody's been helping me with that expense. But probably the thing that brings people to us is the fact that they're at a point where they just can't, they're restless. They can't even sleep. They're too concerned about what's going on in their life financially.
So what would you say to a person who may have said yes to most of those questions that you just asked?
We would usually tell the person that if you answer at least yes to two of these, that you need to contact someone and get some help, such as an organization as ours. Mm-hmm. I like to think if you answered yes to even one, then you need to reach out, or you need to start looking at what your options are, because that's going to tells you something's wrong. And at that point, you need to find out what that is and what's your path to turning that back around.
Well, Nina, since you just mentioned contacting someone for help, do you have the contact information handy for CCCS?
I do. You can reach us at 1-800-642-2227, or you can go to our website at www.cccs-inc.org. On our website, you have the ability to click on a Contact Us form, give as little information as you like, maybe just ask a question. You can also go there and submit your entire income, your budget, and all of your expenses. And once we receive that, I would have a counselor contact the person.
Well, Nina, they always say that admitting you have a problem is the very first step. So why is it that important, though, to admit that you have an issue here?
I think you have to admit a problem before you can seek help for
Sure.
a problem. So ideally, if you're having concerns that the money's not stretching far enough or you're not able to pay someone, then you know that you need to reach out and do something about this.
So say I've come to terms with my situation. I realize that it's time for me to ask for help. I have to reach out. What's the first thing that I should do?
I always suggest that the person find a quiet place, get their bills out, go through them, look at the income that they currently have, look at what their budget might be at this time, and whatever expenses or credit that they might be paying. So it's important to know where that problem is in order to know what you need to do.
What are some things that a person can do that might help them reduce their costs?
In looking at budgets, oftentimes you'll find that a person will go down through their household expenses and they'll give you figures. When I enter these figures, oftentimes I feel like they probably have not really tracked these expenses themselves, because when you tally up the numbers, you find that it just doesn't work with the income you have. So for instance, groceries, we suggest making one trip to the store rather than to go 2 or 3 times a week, and use your coupon and your sale ads. Reducing on things such as cell phones. People always say to me, I can't reduce the cell phone, I'm in a contract. And that's true, but you can reduce what options you have on that cell phone. Do you really need to check your email? Do you need to be able to have, access to a gazillion different functions that, if you had the money's fine, but when you don't, that's something you can reduce on.
Yeah. All right, so say I do all these things. I've run down the checklist, I've made some changes, but it's still not quite enough. What's left? What else can I do here?
At this point, I would suggest that you contact an organization like ours. It's time to reach out and get help so that you can have someone else maybe go through this that has a little more experience and knowledge of these type of situations. One of the things you have to be cautious of is there's different organizations out there, obviously, that you can reach out to, and oftentimes people confuse credit counseling with debt settlement.
That is actually true. I went through a few years ago some financial troubles, and I went through some debt settlement companies, and it was something that I went into very blindly, so I'm well aware of the differences now, but a lot of people might not be. Can you give us some information here? What is debt settlement for most people?
Debt settlement is projected to be a means of paying your debt off at a reduced amount. Oftentimes, what's not clearly stated is what the fee structure is going to be. They're probably a for-profit organization, and the person's unaware of what's going to happen to their credit during this process. We have been on the receiving end of many consumers throughout the years that have been through a debt settlement first and then contacted our organization because they were unaware that the first so many payments ended up being the debt settlement company's fee. Therefore, by the time they got ready to do anything, their credit was already 2 to 3 months delinquent. Other things, I've had people call where they've received legal notices. They were unaware that, the collection efforts by the creditors was going to continue.
Okay, yeah.
So, of course, they call us. They're in tears. They had no idea. What can you do for me? So you really have to make smart decisions when you're having trouble. What you don't need is to compound a problem with another problem. So I always suggest people reach out to Better Business Bureau, the state's attorney general's office in their area, and just make sure that the companies that they're considering are on the up and up.
So you at Consumer Credit Counseling Services of Maryland and Delaware are very different from debt settlement. Credit counseling and debt settlement, 2 very different things. Tell me more about what you do.
Okay. Our organization versus the debt settlement, our purpose and our mission is to do financial education and bring stability back to the family. So as the difference, probably the biggest difference between the 2 companies is a debt settlement is an organization that's promising something. Our organization is going to sit down with the consumer and try to develop financial realistic figures that work for that individual or that family.
Well, Nina, I know you've served as a credit counselor, so how does the whole process work?
Well, it starts with making the call or going online and submitting your information. The counselor is going to review, again, your income. They're going to look at a list of all of your budget items, and then they're going to take a look at the credit debt that you might have. And the idea is to see what you're doing and what recommendations that we can make to get you back on track and reach solvency. The process, it takes probably a one-time session. There's no cost. We do an awful lot of follow-up, so I don't want anybody to think it's a one-and-done process. It isn't by no means.
That's great.
We do a lot of follow-up. We want to make sure that if we've recommended that you handle this on your own, that you've been able to take the recommendations and do something with them, maybe the referral sources that we've also used. Or if we recommended a debt management plan, we want to follow up and make sure that that's working for you and you know what you need to do.
So what are some of the steps that CCCS's debt management program uses to help people get out of debt?
The debt management plan has a real purpose for a person who's unable to meet the payments that their creditors are asking from them.
Okay.
So the idea would be that through the course of this financial review that we've assessed that there's insufficient income for the consumer to pay themselves, and therefore the program becomes an option where they can make one payment to us. We're going to distribute that out to their creditors with the sole purpose of getting them debt-free. We will check in with them along the way. We want them to make sure that they contact us if they see anything different through their statements. But it's a two-way communication, and we're working towards getting the person debt-free.
Well, Nina, based on your experience here, what do your clients really like about being a part of CCCS's debt management program?
The debt management program allows them to have structure, which they've probably fallen out of depending on whatever crisis or whatever's happened in their life that's put them in a position where they're not able to pay their minimum payments any longer. So as opposed to trying to contact many creditors and try to figure out who do I pay first and who's more important and where am I going to come up with the money to pay these people what they want, the program allows them to make this one payment to us. We, in turn, take that money, distribute it out to their creditors, and the whole process works in a manner of as smaller creditors are paid, we keep paying the money into their other creditors with the intention of getting them debt-free in hopefully less than 5 years. And what determines that time would be the amount of money that the person owes.
Yeah, but there is an end date. I mean, you can sit down when you're looking at all the money and you can say, this is going to be the date if we make these payments that everything will be gone.
Absolutely, and that's what they like to see because the other...
Something to work towards.
Exactly. Yeah. The other benefit of the program is oftentimes when consumers fall behind, their interest rates have been escalated. They might be paying late or over the limit fees. So the program, the whole purpose of it is to get them back on track and have this payment that they'll make each month to us. And if they pay timely, providing that their credit hasn't been totally destroyed before they contact us, which is why it's so important to contact us early, we can help them get back on track and possibly improve that score that that they've been fighting with.
Well, we are getting close to the end of our interview here, but I do want to ask you, what advice would you give to listeners who are struggling financially?
I would just, again, ask them to give us a call, sooner rather than later, because the longer you wait, the more delinquency that becomes on your credit history, and then it's harder to repair. So contact an agency, see what we can do to help you.
Well, Nina, what's that contact information one more time?
Our phone number is 1-800-642-2227. Our website is www.cccs-inc.org. And when you're on our website, take advantage of the different resources that we have available. We have many e-learning courses on there, anywhere from identity theft to basic budgeting to savings. We have information about student loans. We also have interactive budgets that they can work with. So there's a lot of information on our website that the person can take advantage of for free, again.
That's great. Free is a very key word, especially for someone who might be finding themselves in a tough situation.
Absolutely.
Which is the reason why they're reaching out to you in the first place. So that's fantastic. Well, Nina Heck, Director of Counseling and Client Services at Consumer Credit Counseling Services of Maryland and Delaware. Really appreciate you coming by today. It's been a pleasure to meet you, too.
Yes, thank you. A pleasure to meet you as well.